So here's the thing with homemade meals. Eating them is great, but all the chopping and measuring and cleanup, not so much. With new one-pan assemble and bake meals from Blue Apron, you get all the flavor of homemade meals with a fraction of the work. Just assemble the pre-chopped ingredients, bake in the oven, and enjoy. Shop, assemble, and bake at blueapron.com. Get 50% off your first 2 orders with code APRON50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Stuck on your commute again? Bad Wi-Fi? No signal? Nothing to do? Time to make your ride a lot more fun with Royal Kingdom. It's a puzzle game that's relaxing, challenging, and works perfectly offline. With no ads and amazing graphics, every level feels fresh and satisfying. Each round only takes a few minutes, ideal for a daily commute or wherever you have a little bit of time. So download Royal Kingdom now on Google Play or App Store.
Hi there, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. One of the things I find most interesting when you're looking at 20th century social history is the kind of the prevalence of the idea of utopias. Be that the kind of social utopias that are envisaged by various state planners, the idea of kind of the historical endpoint, the eschatology, that's in kind of Marxist-Leninism, the idea that we will reach a historical endpoint. It'll be a very horrible, bloody business to get there. But honestly, when we do, it'll be so great that all the suffering and the pain and the misery will be worth it. There are racial utopias, hideous, dark fantasies of a kind of racially pure societies. Nazism, of course, being the key one, but not the only one. Most kind of European colonial powers, and obviously the ethno-states that emerge mid-century, all have these sorts of ideas encoded within them. And there are other kinds of racial utopias, the utopias of colonial subjugation, apartheid South Africa, where a white ruling class lives a life of wealth and privilege based on the backs of black labor. So every utopia is one in which a kind of an imagined good life is envisaged. And post-war American suburban utopia is of a piece with this. And the means of achieving that utopia is a certain kind of managed capitalism, corporate managerial capitalism, where corporate planning and scientific management, and particularly scientific demand management, the kind of Walter Lippmann type management of the public mind, kind of leads to these utopian outcomes. Now, the person to read on this, and I've talked about her book before, A Consumer's Republic, is Lizabeth Cohen. And I don't know if there's one volume that's better at encapsulating the world of the consumer in post-war America than A Consumer's Republic. And what's brilliant about her thesis is that it identifies something that's hugely powerful within kind of post-war consumerism, that it was a way of directing political activism into a very kind of safe and tame arena. If a politics of consumerism could be built, of consumer rights, of consumer thought and choice, then that is a kind of a highly individualized, individualistic way of channeling the kind of the public mind. It's straight out of kind of Lippmann and Bernays and that kind of thing. And it steers the population at large away from more collectivist ways of thinking. And this could, without a brilliantly resourced book behind it, all sound slightly conspiratorial, but it's not. In that it was a kind of a well thought out and explicit politics, and it was one that was led not so much by elected politicians or elected political class, but more the kind of the corporate and business elites who looked in much more far-reaching ways than I think that we often realise about what American capitalism and American democracy would be like in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years after the Second World War. So one of the sites of this utopia was, of course, Suburbia. And American suburbia, America's not the only place to develop a suburbia. Here I'm sat right at the end of a railway line that runs from the city centre of Cardiff right out to the edges of the city in a 1930s house. I sit here in a kind of a British railway branch line suburbia. When the poet John Betjeman wrote about a particular kind of British utopia or an English utopia, he wrote about Metroland, the interconnected towns and villages north of London into Buckinghamshire that were kind of almost an extension of the metropole itself, but were a kind of a rural, semi-rural, semi-urbanized idyll, all connected by railways. And in America, suburbia is connected by cars. Okay. So Lizabeth Cohen writes, in 1957, the mass circulation women's magazine Red Book released a film entitled In the Suburbs to persuade national advertisers that it had its finger on the unique pulse of a massive new market, the young adults who had been streamed out of the cities into mass-built homes in the exploding suburban communities of post-war America. Through an ethnographic portrait of the newly evolving suburban lifestyle, the film captured the distinctive sights and sounds of the 50s suburbia. The happy, high-pitched voices of a huge new post-war generation of children being born and raised there. The buzzing sociability at neighbourhood parties where young residents built worlds of peers to replace family and other ties left behind in the city. The endless home improvement schemes undertaken by proud and ambitious new homeowners, and most importantly to the magazine and its advertisers, the proliferation of voracious consumers who have come into their purchasing stage and are off on a wild non-stop ride in a happy-go-spending world. The idea of it being a world of consuming, and that the way that you navigate the world, the way you have rights in the world, the way that you interact with the world is through consumption, and that your growth in that world, there seems to be no possible limit to it. That there are that the ability to consume more is always there.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Today's trivia quiz is on mobile games.
All right, I'm very excited about this one.
I'm going to give you a few hints. Ready?
Ready?
This game has no ads and no need for Wi-Fi to play.
Wait, so does it cost a lot of money?
Nope, it's completely free to play.
What? No way.
It has amazing graphics, and they recently added a bunch of new mini-games.
Hold on, is that Royal Kingdom?
Yes, bingo. So if you haven't played Royal Kingdom yet, go to the App Store or Google Play and download it for free.
Come to DSW for the shoes, stay for the fun. Because let's be honest, if shoe shopping isn't fun, are you even doing it right? So go ahead, try something new. Try something different. Good different. Try something that feels like you. You know, the real you. And then definitely brag about it later. Because at DSW, you've got unlimited freedom to play. With sneakers, boots, and everything in between for every style, mood, and occasion, you'll definitely find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. DSW. Let us surprise you.
Having geared its articles to the life concerns and material interests of this new young adult suburban market of more than 2.5 million families, who not coincidentally were buying 70% of all homes sold, Redbook invited its prospective advertisers to join ranks to reach this buy it now generation. Of course, we're talking about baby boomers here coming of age. Although in the suburbs was an ambiguous marketing tool that simplistically stereotypes suburbanites, the link it identified between mass consumption and suburbanization was broadly recognized in post-war American society as suburbia became the distinctive residential landscape in the consumer's republic. That commitment to rebuild the American economy and society after World War II around the mass consumer market. At an astonishing pace, the futuristic highways, suburban Pleasantvilles surrounding Centerton, and appliance-equipped single-family homes showcased in the New York World's Fair model democracy of 1939 to 40 were becoming a reality. Between 1947 and 1953, the suburban population increased by 43%, in contrast to a general population increase of only 11%. Over the course of the 1950s, in the 20 largest metropolitan cities, metropolitan areas, cities would only grow by only 0.1%. Their suburbs by an explosive 45%. So this idea of the white flight of white families leaving inner city areas to suburbia. As Fortune magazine excitedly informed its business readers in its own expose on the lush new suburban market, suburbanites' buying power was even greater than their numbers. The 30 million Americans that Fortune counted as suburban residents in 1953 may have represented 19% of the US population, but they spent 29% of its income, with their higher paychecks and home ownership rates and more children 14 and under than the rest of the metropolitan population. All indicators of high consumption. Just as the framers of the Consumers' Republic had hoped, the privatised mass consumption, much of it linked to suburbanisation, was proving itself an ideal strategy for boosting national recovery and prosperity. Annual consumer expenditures for housing and automobiles alone, without appliances and other furnishings, more than tripled between 1941 and 1961, rising from $2,513, rising to $2,513 from $718 per household in constant dollars. When home ownership rates jumped from not quite 44% in 1940 to 62% in 1960, the suburban home itself became the consumer republic's quintessential mass consumer commodity, capable of fueling the fires of the post-war economy, while also improving the standard of living of the mass of Americans. So, suburbia is, I think, I'm not saying it's an overlooked facet of the study of post-war American life, but it is so fundamental to our understandings of demographic change, of culture and outlook and mentality and belief in the 1950s and 60s, from the buildings of the first Levittown onwards, that it really is important for us to kind of focus on and examine. And it is part of how kind of we understand this kind of generational change that we confront in the mid-1960s, when you have a kind of like a post-war conservatism meeting the counterculture head on. And it's also a thing that drives consumerism. Obviously, when you build a house, you have to fill it with stuff, but it's symbolic of more than that. It was symbolic of a kind of a dream, of an escape to a physical location, of a kind of an idyll. Hence my kind of interest in utopias being met sort of here. A lot of this is the product of specific and unique and potentially unrepeatable circumstances. I think that a lot of post-war American politics seems to be based on, particularly in the 80s and 90s, seems to be based on a kind of a fraud almost. A lie that the living conditions and living standards that existed in 1955 could be maintained without a massive ideological transition, could be maintained in 1985 or 1995. Of course, kind of neoliberalism is all about the subtly kind of laying waste to all of that largesse, where you have working class families with relatively decent living standards and conditions, the ability to have 2 cars and foreign holidays, or at least long paid holidays in the US, and the prospect of children going to college. This is something that neoliberalism turned in, kind of reversed, turned the clock back on through the creation of massive inequality, and also the removal or the undermining of the public provision of many of the advantages that white suburbanites had been given. By the time you get to the 1980s, there's the prevalence of a kind of this genre of suburbia in crisis movies, which runs all the way into the 1990s, up to things like American Beauty, and the suburban dream is under threat not only from kind of rapacious neoliberalism eroding pensions and living standards and driving inequality, but also actually from a certain kind of countercultural longing for freedom and for an escape from conformity. Whilst it was quite fashionable eventually to kind of deride the conformity of suburbia, and for writers and filmmakers and musicians to want to escape it and the dullness of suburbia. Those that moved into places like Levittown and the suburban idylls of the 1950s genuinely liked it, because why wouldn't you? You know, it represented a significant improvement in living standards for the largely white people that got to live there. In a special issue on The New America in 1957, Newsweek, and this is all Lizabeth Cohen, by the way, explained the way that suburbia benefited both the larger economy and the individuals within it. It pointed to a consensus among economists that the suburbanite is tomorrow's best customer and a firm foundation for the future national prosperity. It went on to praise suburbia's success in offering ordinary Americans a bigger piece of the pie. The typical suburbanite, Newsweek asserted, is fast becoming a man of prosperity. His savings may be in the form of equities in house and appliances, but month by month he's becoming a man of substance, as his goods, desires, and income and his numbers are all going up and up. As suburbanization gave a majority of Americans for the first time ever the opportunity to become people of property, it also seemed to promise a surefire way of incorporating a wide range of Americans into a mass consumption-based middle class. This is a trope that you experience in people looking at American class and society. The idea of a middle class is not quite the way in which in Britain, say for example, a British middle class imagines itself. The working class of the kind of the New Deal onwards, and the post New Deal years of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, was an industrial working class, basically, with suburban living standards. And the middle class was created. This middle class, there had been a middle class previously, but had been a mass middle class, had been created from a meeting of the New Deal and post-war prosperity.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled podcast with some breaking news. Millions of people are now playing the mobile puzzle game Royal Kingdom. This is not a drill. Royal Kingdom has thousands of levels and is incredibly fun. What's that? I'm hearing from my producer that it has no ads. And it is completely free to download? What's next? You're going to tell me it doesn't need Wi-Fi? This just in, Royal Kingdom doesn't need Wi-Fi to play. We will continue to keep you updated as this story develops, but get it today and see for yourself. Download it on the Google Play or App Store today.
As suburbanization gave a majority of Americans for the first time the opportunity to become people of property, it also seemed to promise a surefire way of incorporating a wide range of Americans into a mass consumption-based middle class. Suburbia is the exemplification of a new and growing moneyed middle class, bound sooner or later to become the American market, socially and economically more uniform. Fortune exalted. A long sought more egalitarian America seemed to be arriving via the rows of raised ranches on 5,000 square foot lots. So again, this is really interesting. This is of course this is the expansion of living standards and affluence, but it was meant to feel egalitarian, meritocratic, as close to sort of social justice as American political discourse was kind of willing to allow. but it was meritocratic, framed within race. Suburbia was for white people, and it was framed within the idea of work, of the dignity of labour, and this was what the white working man deserved for his efforts. This was not the first time in American history, of course, that purchasing a home, particularly one away from the city's business centre, offered owners a way of securing middle-class status. Victorian streetcar and garden suburbs and the bungalow building of the 1920s provided important precedents, but the links to established networks of train and trolley transportation required in an era before mass auto ownership and federally funded highways. The much smaller scale of building possible before the post-war merchant builders introduced mass production type construction, and the absence of government mortgage assistance to broaden the potential consumer market made these early suburban expansions less inclusive in their promise and appeal. Rather, late 19th and early 20th century suburbs often housed wealthy commuters alongside lower-income vassals to serve them. 20s bungalows developments attracted more middle-class residents, but on a smaller scale than in the post-war era, with annual housing starts ballooning from 142,000 in 1944 to more than 1 million in 1946, to a height of almost 2 million in 1950, after which it stabilised at about 1.3 million a year. Mass suburbia was an apt description. A lot of this, again, is the meeting of modern construction systems, basically houses literally being driven across the country, wooden track houses being driven across the country on the backs of lorries, and also government-backed mortgages. Literally things being safe as houses. And after the experience of the Great Depression, this was a means by which the state could intervene to guarantee not just kind of decent living standards for people, but the stability of post-war capitalism itself. One of Roosevelt's legacies was that the idea of saving capitalism from its more primal forces was a part of democratic governments, democratic administrations, and Eisenhower as well, all the way up to 1968. Anyway, there we'll leave it today, but I'm definitely going to dive back into this book because Suburbia is so fascinating. And what's so fascinating really is not so much the physical space of Suburbia, but the dreams that it encapsulated. Anyway, I'll leave you there. Thanks very much. And there's some announcements coming down the line as we get into a year of learning here at the Explaining History podcast. There'll be some cool things coming in January, but more on that soon. All the best. Bye-bye.
Military life often means juggling schedules, deployments, and constant change. At American Military University, we understand the challenges military families face. That's why our affordable, flexible online programs are built to move with you. Whether you're at home, on base, or managing life in between, at AMU, you don't have to choose between supporting your family and reaching your personal goals. Learn more at amu.apus.edu.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.